Once upon a time, in a very small village, lived a girl called Ijemma. Ijemma was a very poor girl who lived with her old grandmother. She was a stammerer, and people in the village always made fun of her. They would mimic how she stammered, and this broke Ijemma's heart. One of the bullies, named Ogadi, had always bullied Ijemma since they were kids. One day, this was few years ago, Ogadi and her friends met Ijemma on her way back from the local market. Ijemma's grandmother had sent her to buy some food items from the market as they had no food at home. On Ijemma's way back from the market, she met Ogadi and her friends, who threw the food items on the floor and began to step on them. Ijemma tried to defend herself, but Ogadi and her friends began to laugh, calling her demeaning names. Ijemma and her grandmother stayed hungry that day because of what Ogadi and her friends did. This was the beginning of Ijemma's dilemma, as Ogadi and her friends bullied Ijemma and mimicked her stammering at every given opportunity. Because of this, Ijemma kept to herself and avoided discussions with people in the village, as she did not want people to know that she stammered. Ijemma's grandmother would always tell her how special she was, but Ijemma found it hard to believe her grandmother's words. For so many years, Ijemma did not partake in any ceremony in the village. Whilst other villagers would gather in the market square, Ijemma would sit next to her grandmother and sing. Although she stammered, Ijemma noticed that she sang fluently without stammering. She found solace in singing, as this was the only time she felt confident in herself. One day, this was during the famous New Yam festival. The villagers had gathered to celebrate the harvesting of new yams. Ijemma stayed back at home, singing sweet melodies to her grandmother. As she sang, it felt as though the whole world stood still. Ijemma sang to her heart's content. When she was done singing, her grandmother handed her a very beautiful dress and told her to head to the festival. Ijemma was not willing to go to the festival as she feared being bullied by Ogadi and her friends. But her grandmother told her that he who is brave is free and that time had come for her to face her fears. Ijemma then put on the dress her grandmother gave her and set out to the festival. On her way to the market square, Ogadi and her two friends surrounded Ijemma and began to laugh at her. All Ijemma wanted to do at that point was to run home and lock herself in, but her grandmother's words kept echoing in her mind. So, Ijemma ignored the bullies and headed straight to the festival. This was the first time Ijemma was attending the village festival. She had not had this much fun in her life, so she decided to make good use of the opportunity. They soon began to sing her favorite song, and Ijemma could not hold herself back. She began to sing at the top of her voice. The more she sang, the more her confidence increased. As she was singing, she felt a tap on her shoulder. Ijemma turned and saw a very beautiful girl. "I am a Daisy," the girl said with a smile on her face. This was the first time anyone was introducing themselves to Ijemma. "My name is Ijemma," she replied, and the beautiful girl smiled and asked if she could be Ijemma's friend. This felt surreal, as Ijemma never had friends. She could not understand why a girl that beautiful would want to be her friend. However, she was happy about it, and accepted to be Adaize's friend. After a few hours, the festival ended and Ijemma returned home. She told her grandmother about her new friend Adaeze, and her grandmother was happy to see how excited Ijemma was. The next morning, Adaeze paid Ijemma a visit. They took a stroll around the village and soon stumbled upon Ogadi and her friends, who ignored Ijemma and Adaeze. Ijemma could not believe that Ogadi would walk past her quietly without saying hurtful words to her. As the days went by, Ijemma and Adaeze grew closer and became best of friends. Ijemma felt so confident speaking with Adaeze, as Adaeze never complained about her stammering. One day, Adaeze pleaded with Ijemma to escort her home. Ijemma had never been to Adaeze's house before, so she agreed and they set out on their way. After a few minutes of walking, Ijemma saw herself in front of the king's palace. It was then that Adaeze revealed to her that she was the princess of the village. Ijemma was filled with shock. She could not believe that she was friends with the princess of their village. Her jaw dropped as she stared at Adaeze, who smiled at her and invited her into the palace. Ijemma spent the whole day at the palace and could not wait to tell her grandmother that her friend Adaeze was the princess of their village. When it was evening, Ijemma left the palace to go home. On her way out of the palace, she met a very handsome man who asked for her name. Ijemma was about replying when she noticed that she was about to stammer, so she ran away without telling the man her name. Ijemma felt embarrassed by what happened, and this dampened her spirit. She felt so sad and wished she could stop stammering. The next morning, Ijemma was washing some clothes at the back of their hut, singing at the top of her voice. She heard a sound from behind. When she turned, she saw the handsome man she saw at the king's palace the previous day. Ijemma froze as she wondered what the man was doing at her hut. "I'm sorry to startle you," he said, as he introduced himself to Ijemma as Prince Arinze. Ijemma could not believe that the handsome man was the prince of the village. "I hope I have not done anything wrong," Ijemma said as she stammered, and the prince smiled and replied Ijemma saying that he admired her so much. Ijemma was shocked as she did not understand what the prince was talking about. It was then that the prince revealed that his sister and himself were taking a stroll in the village on the day of the festival when they saw Ijemma being bullied by some girls. They wanted to intervene when they surprisingly saw Ijemma standing up for herself. At that point, the prince revealed that he fell deeply in love with Ijemma. Ijemma's jaw dropped as the prince confessed his undying feelings for her. "How can you love a girl that stammers?" Ijemma asked the prince, who replied her saying that he had not seen such perfection in anyone. Prince Arinze told Ijemma that the only disability in life is a bad attitude, and that the people who bullied her were the ones with life's greatest disability. These words uplifted Ijemma's spirit as she fell deeply in love with the prince. Princess Adaeze was happy that her only brother had fallen in love with her best friend. Shortly afterwards, the prince introduced Ijemma to his father, the king, as the woman he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. The king approved and sent his guards to announce to the villagers that the prince was getting married. A few days to the royal wedding, Ogadi and her friends stumbled upon Ijemma by the riverside. They beat her up and pushed her into the river as they laughed and left her to her fate. On the day of the marriage ceremony, the whole village gathered in front of the king's palace to witness the marriage of Prince Arinze. Everyone was eager to know who the new bride was, and to everyone's amazement, the prince introduced Ijema as his bride, and everyone was in shock, especially Ogadi and her friends. They began to regret all they had done to Ijema and wished they could turn back the hands of the clock. That was how Ijema got married to the prince, who later became the king of their village many years later after the death of his father. Ijema never punished Ogadi and her friends for all they did to her. She forgave them and they lived all their lives regretting their actions and wished they acted kindly towards Ijema. The lesson to be learned from this story is that we should not look down on others because of their unique conditions. Learn to be kind to people no matter what, because you do not know what life has in stock for anyone in the future. The rejected stone, remember, oftentimes becomes the cornerstone. Be wise. I hope you enjoyed the story. Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. It helps us grow our channel. I'll see you in our next story. Bye.